Okay, we've put 20 in there, so you can start away there, Sean. I'll keep adding them as they come in.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and good evening to what is the second of our Q&As with John Hogan. I suppose this is the idea behind this was always to, as we're in lockdown and people don't get to access as much information as they like, this is an opportunity to tap into what the expertise of John on topics. And I'm going to go with the first question, John, and we were briefly discussing there before people arrived, but I'm noticing on some of my fruit trees, I am noticing yellowing of the leaves, and particularly the tree, the pear trees that has blossoms on them, they seem to be a bit more droopy. And I'm wondering, is that? No, I didn't think I had much frost last night, or is it just a change in temperatures, or is it cold? Now they are only planted about 4 weeks. And they were bare rooted go in. Actually, they're probably 5 weeks now, but they were bare rooted trees that went in.
Well, I suppose, Sean, there's a number of questions and possibly a number of answers there in that, but they're only 4 or 5 weeks planted. And for the part of the world that you come from, you generally speaking, even this time of the year, get sufficient moisture. But this year is an exception. And the whole country, possibly with the exception of the south and the southeast, is getting unseasonably dry and cold weather. Cold as in last night and the night before, for some of us, a slight frost. And before that, on Sunday, I think most of the country experienced an incredibly cold, windy day. The wind mostly coming from the north and the northeast. And because I think your trees are only recently planted the last 4 or 5 weeks, they are going to droop a little bit for a while, even if the weather was a little bit nicer, because you'd say the pear trees in particular are in flower, which means they're reasonably well advanced, and they also must have a lot of leaves. And when you have a lot of leaves on something that's only after being planted, the root is there, but it really hasn't attached itself hugely to the soil just yet. And even though you told me before we started that you're watering once or twice a day, and that's fine, and you need to continue doing that and keep it very moist around the roots. But the roots need to get attached to the clay, and then they'll take the moisture from the clay up through the root. And really what you need to do is replenish the water that's evaporating or transpiring out through the leaves. And I always say, you have to imagine the more leaves there is, the more drying there is, the more evaporation there is. But then there's an awful lot bigger requirement for water. Now, if the weather at the moment was relatively mild, I don't think the drooping would be just as much, or if it was more humid, because you'd have a film of water or a film of moisture on the leaf, and the sun and the wind would be taking that moisture from the surface of the leaf. But at the minute it's taken it from the leaf, and the leaf is not getting enough from the root. And I think those trees will be fine if you continue watering them. They will be fine. And that leads me on that, my advice generally speaking to people who are planting anything like trees or shrubs, if you can plant them in the autumn, it's so much better, because at that time of the year, most trees and shrubs, the deciduous ones in particular, are beginning to lose their leaves. And even though the weather might be cold and it might be windy, it will certainly be damper, which is probably helpful, but there isn't the same amount of evaporation going on. And the root very slowly gets out without any pressure on it to bring moisture up to supply the leaves. But that's, theory talking, it's lovely to talk about planting in the autumn. I suppose there's a huge amount of planting going on at the moment in all our gardens, if we're lucky enough to be able to get plants, just because we have more time. The issue of planting is always down, have we got the time in the autumn or the spring? But to answer your question, I think mostly what you have when you mentioned drooping, I think you have dehydration. I think the dehydration is due mostly to, we've had a lot of wind. You think you you've had for the last 4 or 5 weeks? I've not seen in my lifetime, I'm in this business since 1972, and I've never seen as much wind, and I've never seen such rapid drying in April in the first week of May. Never. So sometimes we see it for 10 days or 2 weeks, and we're delighted to get it to do some spring work. But this, for me, is unprecedented.
Okay, and there's nothing apart from watering that I really need to do, I suppose.
Well, the other thing that you did do, you told me this earlier on, is you give a good quantity of good decomposed farmer manure down underneath. And farmer manure in itself, if it's well decomposed and well rotten, has a great capacity to hold moisture. But it's my guess that what you did is you put that down reasonably deep, you put a good layer of clay in on top of it, you planted your trees and spread your roots out over the clay, you probably staked it, then you filled it in with clay, and then you watered it. But as I said at the outset, it's my guess that the roots haven't meshed yet with the soil. So you have to keep watering. They don't have the capacity to bring up the quantity that's needed to match the evaporation. But they will be fine. They will be fine.
Okay, now the only thing I didn't do, John, was I didn't stake them because they were small rootstock, and I always am of the opinion that staking trees often too high ruins the.
No, I agree with that, and I also agree with what you did is plant them small. People love to plant. It's a mistake, and they're expensive. And you have to try and say is that if there's a big root, it's going to establish and then it'll grow a big tree quick. But if you have a big top and a smaller root, then it's not going to do as well. So plant small, I think, is the right thing in that. And yes, once you plant small, you don't really need to stake. But maybe you might find after a while, depending on what shelter you have, how winds are coming from, maybe the tree might want to start leaning in a direction, and maybe you might have to stake it there on. But if you stake it low.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a million for that, John.
All right.
Okay, John's Kevin here again. Could I just get you maybe to tilt your camera a little bit forward so we can see you? Or even if you sit forward, whichever one's handiest for you.
How are you now?
That's perfect, that's great now. Just everyone, we're going to go to a few pre-asked questions for John, but if you have any other questions or anything that comes up, just type them into the chat here and I'll put them to John. So John, first question we've got in here, 1 second now. We have from Tom and Mary Dunn. The question is, I have 9 acres, which was drained approximately 25 years ago. It's a low-lying field, and in winter it is damp. There's a lot of plantain, grass, and silverweed present. To try to remove these, what type of grass seed can I plant? The soil type is peaty with marley underneath. I tried to farm organically without being certified. Now, I think Tom and Mary are there. Tom and Mary, can you hear us? Everywhere anyway, 1 second now.
Yeah, they're on. I think they're on mute.
Hang on, I can unmute them there, 1 second.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Mary, go ahead.
Okay, listen, I'm going to pass you back to Tom because it was his question, okay?
Okay, great.
No problem.
Yeah, sorry about that, John.
You're all right, Tom. How are you?
No bother, no bother. John, I have, it's low-lying field, as you, marginal land. What is the best type of, actually, what's the best way to go about reseeding that field?
At the minute, Tom, is the field in grass at the moment?
Yes.
Or is it grass. And do you need it to be in grass for fodder, or what's the story?
No, just for grazing.
Just for grazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look at. I think the question that you put to me is the right approach. When you mention plantain and you mention silverweed, and if they're in very, very big numbers, then you have to reduce. You have to reduce the opposition to the grass. And I would be on for reseeding, but obviously you need that this summer for grazing.
Yeah.
So you should be aiming to reseed in the autumn.
That's correct, yeah.
Now, is it very highly grazed at the moment, or could it be possible that you could do this in 2 halves, half this year and half next year?
No, this year it wouldn't be possible.
Okay.
No.
And have you other land, Tom, that the stock could be brought on to if you were to take on all this in the one go?
I could, yeah. I have other land rented.
That's fine. That's what I wanted to wonder. I just didn't know whether you had to try and manage with the stock within the 25 acres or whether you have other options or not.
Yeah.
My advice would be, and at the moment this would be a tremendous opportunity, if we could remove the weeds, and you want to do this organically, that's what you've said.
Yeah.
And way of getting rid of troublesome weeds, and silverweed is a devil, so is plantain, but silverweed is hard to get rid of because it has a type of a little rhizome. And the best way of getting rid of them is to try and plough the ground, and if you can during the summer, continue to till it, grub it. as much as you can, something like a tying harrow, and keep constantly going out and bringing the weeds and the roots and the rhizomes to the surface. Because you can plant all the grass you like, but you're not going to beat silverweed. It'll beat you. So you have to try and eliminate the weeds that's in your way first. That would absolutely be my advice. It's the same with scotch grass, or the same with docks or perennial weeds. If you're trying to get rid of them organically, then the only way to do it is to do it a year in advance of sowing, or certainly months before sowing. Right. So normally we do that in the summertime. If it had been done in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I'd say you would have achieved it almost by now, because you could have been out every 2 or 3 days, because the weeds that would have been brought to the surface, they would have literally dried within a couple of days with the wind and the temperatures. Right. So I really think that's what you have to do. You said it was drained 25 years ago, but it's still damp. I wonder why that is.
Well, it's where I am. I'm in the kind of in a valley in the low-lying area, and everyone else around me is higher. Okay. I'm in the lowest point, and there's a few springs on it.
There's a few springs in it.
I reckon so. Yeah.
And when it was drained, Tom, it must have been drained to a lower point than you then, was it?
No, maybe to a level point. No, the water went out. The water went out.
The water went out?
Yeah.
I wonder, could it be that where the water went out, is that cleaned periodically or ever cleaned?
It has never been cleaned since I put it in.
Yeah, you see, I often think you have to understand, and you said you're a bit peaty as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
There will be soil that will follow the water to wherever the water is going, and after a period of time, it will build up and start to shrink. So it's probably worth going down and having a look at where that is mostly the lower point is. See if there's a build up of any soils there. If there was, clear it and try and get that flow going again. Because if you went to all the trouble of draining it 25 years ago, and if the drains are working, well, then it'd be great if the water could get away quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I'm not an expert, Tom, on grasses, to be honest, about what is the best grasses. And my advice to you would be to talk to your local grass seed supplier. And I would be emphasizing to him that exactly what you said to me, that your soil is peaty. You said underneath there's a heavy type of pottery clay, isn't there?
Yeah, correct.
So penetration down through that is going to be very, very poor. So there is varieties that are more suitable for that type of soil. I'm not familiar with them, but I would talk to somebody that would be very good on the supply of grasses and explain to them what you're trying to do. You probably would need to be at this early autumn.
Autumn, okay.
It's damp in the winter, then getting reseeding if it gets damp or wet would be nearly impossible. So you should be sort of aiming for something maybe in late August.
Yeah, and plough it first, you say, John.
If it were mine now and I could do without it, and you have a lot of silverweed and a lot of plantain and other weeds, I would love to see you ploughing it now.
Right.
And getting out, if the weather stays like what it is, Tom, 5 or 6 days or 4 or 5 days maybe after you plough it, you could start to grub it with a triple K harrow or anything with little teeth in it.
Yeah.
And first run, I probably wouldn't go too deep, 3 or 4 inches, and just bring to the surface whatever's in the top 3 or 4 inches. And then the next time I'd go down an inch deeper. And if the weather stays like what it is, I'd stay at it until I got everything up from 7 or 8 or 9 inches. Keep bringing everything to the surface. You'll see the rhizomes and the roots drying out.
Yeah.
At it. Now, what you wouldn't do is go in with a disc, because if there's rhizomes there, you're only dividing the rhizomes. You're trying to comb the roots and the rhizomes to the surface without breaking them too much.
Okay.
And you're trying to dry them out.
Yeah.
And I've seen that being done very, very successfully on fields. Not so much with plantain, but certainly with silverweed and with scotchgrass, them two in particular, and horsetails. Do you have any horsetails there?
No, not particularly.
No. Right.
No.
Horsetails would normally be another weed that you would get, again, a type of a rhizome in damp ground. The other thing that might be worth your while doing, Tom, might be testing that soil for pH. It could be quite low. and we were talking to the seed supplier and telling them that, you know, your pH is whatever the result is, because there are certain species of grass that they could recommend to you, and maybe they'll recommend one or two other species other than grass that might do very well in that soil.
Yeah.
Not just maybe all grasses, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I believe there's a new type of grass out now, Nashia or something.
Yes, I've heard, as I said to you, I'm more horticulture than agriculture, and I'm not great on grasses, so I don't want to give you wrong information. I think the information given you in trying to get rid of the weeds is hugely important, because it won't make a difference which grass you put in. If we don't get rid of the weeds, they'll be back as strong as ever in a couple of years' time, and then it'll be a waste of your money.
Okay, okay.
So this is the time, Tom, now to this time of the year. As I said, maybe it would have been great if we'd have done 4 or 5 weeks ago, but we're still only going into summer. And, you know, if we get spells of reasonably dry weather, you will succeed in keeping that broad to the top and drying it out and greatly reducing the numbers.
Okay.
And as I said, I'm more in favour of using some sort of a toothed machine, like a triple K or a pigtail harrow, and maybe even a good grass harrow for the first run.
Right, yeah.
Your harrow on it, don't keep going in the one direction all the time. Keep going crossways on it, in case that you start to miss some of the routes. If you do them one way, left, right, and then north, south, west,
yeah. Right. Thank you, John.
Yeah, just on that point, John, tomorrow we have Robbie Byrne coming in on, and he does a good bit on this area of grass. So it might be worthwhile logging on tomorrow and we could pose that question to him, because I suppose there is a new wave of thought coming out, particularly in livestock management, that maybe plantain is desirable. I'm not silverweed, no, but plantain from a livestock perspective could be is a very useful plant in mixed species grassland. And Robbie would have a lot more information on this than I would, you know. So it might be worth your while if you're able to log on tomorrow, same time. I think it's the same time, Kevin, isn't it?
Yep, 7 o'clock tomorrow.
I very good advice, Sean, because you need to go to where the expertise is in the grasses, and as I said, there may be other species that would also complement what you're doing. And you want all this trouble of ploughing and getting rid of the weeds. But then you need to absolutely make sure you get the best advice.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Now, John, the next question we have is from Colm O'Regan. Colm, can you hear us there?
Hi, John. How are you?
Colm, how are you?
Pop it up here. We've got, can I sow low clover between rows of biodegradable film? I want to reduce weeds and help fertility. Will the clover interfere with the crop?
Okay, that's a good question, and I've had that question a number of times in the last couple of years. The first part of the question is, yes, you can sow clover into the paths between your biodegradable plastics. There are a number of things that you need to be wary about. Now, the first thing I'd say is, now where you're on relatively light land, Colm, and if you're thinking about doing this now, it's very likely that your pathways are very dry, I would think, are they?
Yes.
So ensuring that we get good germination. Are you going to be irrigating the crop that's under the biodegradable plastic or not?
It looks like I will, John, the way things are going.
And then if you are, you're in business, because normally we just irrigating the crop, but you'll also be irrigating the pathways, and that will give you the germination that you will need. Now, you have to be careful now, Colm, which clovers you might go for there, because you need quick fix clovers. And I did see a problem with an organic grower 2 years ago in Wicklow, where he did trials with putting clover in the pathways, but he also put clover between rows of crops that were 28 or 30 inches apart. But not having sufficient information on the clover, some of the clovers became very, very vigorous, and started to encroach on the crops. And yes, did a great job in controlling weeds, which was his reason for doing it. and it did help also in fixing some nitrogen. But unfortunately, some of it creeped up in some of these lower grown crops, and it wasn't that suitable. It competed with low grown foliage. In some of the other crops like Brussels sprouts and even cauliflowers, it wasn't a problem because the crops were tall enough. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Didn't continue with it because he felt that the benefits didn't pay for the cost of it, and he's lost the yield in some of the lower grown crops because a lot of these crops were salad crops. He wasn't in biodegradable plastic, he was just on bare soil. So I would be inclined to say that maybe the clovers you need to look at for now to keep you going till the end of the year would be the berseem clovers or the crimson clovers. Both of those two are quick grown. Both of them are good ground covers. Both of them are both strong against weeds, in suffocating weeds.
Okay.
Possibly what you might have to do, Colin, is do something as soon as they start encroaching up on the edge of the plastic. You might have to just keep them pulled down with a rake or something. You won't be able to go with a trimmer or you'll destroy that plastic. But maybe keep them pulled back to the middle of the pathway might be the only thing I can say, because they will, if they get going and you're going watering, they will, even those two will grow quite aggressively.
This winter squash I kind of have a target for, and I put in a few rows of sweet corn as well through black poly.
Well, you won't have any problem with either of those two. You won't have any problem. I thought maybe you were talking about some of your salads.
No. I just want to put these crops in and be done with them, and the ground doing something else as well rather than growing weeds.
Squashes, I mean, nothing competes with a squash once it gets established.
Yeah.
Canopy of the leaf of the squash would suppress pretty well anything, and will certainly keep the clover at bay, and you won't have a problem with the sweet corn because it's going to grow quite tall. It might, if it creeps in, it might grow up a little bit on the bottom of the sweet corn, but what difference if it goes up 3 or 4 or 6 inches? There's no corn going to be down that low anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it will do a job for you for sure. I can see the merit of the question. You don't want to be weeding unless you have to weed, so that will take care of the weed. It certainly will fix a little bit of nitrogen for you, and them two crops I think would be ideal. Your pathways are what width?
They're probably a good 2 feet. They're 24 inches from plastic to plastic. There may be more. They could be 30 inches.
Yeah. You see, we all think that they're much less. In theory, they're much less. When you go to be down the plastic and you bury it 3 or 4 inches underneath the ground, you miss that 3 or 4 inches up on top of the ground for the plastic. So the wheel track or the path would normally be 16 or 18 inches, turns out to be 24 or 28 or 30 inches, as you said. And that is quite a wide span for weeds to grow.
I think it's half your field, John, roughly. Nearly half the field is not under plastic.
Yeah, I see it because quite a number of people who grow courgettes, that's one of the biggest issues they have. They use the biodegradable plastic, but they always find that the weeds take over on the pathways, particularly if you have a wet year and you have a big infestation of red checked, fat hen, orange. Those weeds in particular can be very aggressive. Cleavers is another devil. It creeps in across the crop. So no, I can see the merit of what you're doing, and I think it's a good idea. Once you can get the seed sown, get enough soil on it to cover it, and if you're putting on water, well then you will have a big success. The issue, if you weren't putting on water in the weather that we now have, it probably would be very slow to germinate.
Yeah. I actually tried a small bit, John, just because I put the question in 2 weeks ago, but I couldn't ask the question until tonight, and I done some clover, I suppose 10 days ago, and it's up. It germinated. I just put on the surface and pulled the rake over it, just a bush tied onto a rake, just walked up and down it. I had an acre done in 20 minutes. It's no bother, like.
I think your part of the world, you were a bit fortunate. If I go by phone calls I got during the week, I think you got nice little bits of rain, didn't you?
We're nearly an inch since we spoke to you last, and I was looking. We're only 5 mil moisture deficit. I know you're much worse.
Well, we since I was talking to you on the Thursday after I was talking to you last, some of our places got 23 mil, some got 18. I only got 9 where I live. Some got 35.
Wow.
But today I was up in some of the land in County Louth, they got 35, and you would not think it ever rained.
It's gone. Yeah, it's gone.
Just disappeared. We've had ferocious cold winds, and one of the reasons the lads can't irrigate, they have the equipment and they have the water, but the damn thing is so windy it finishes up in the neighbour's field. But they're very restricted on the number of hours. Today was one of the first days, I'd say. We didn't water yesterday, we didn't water Sunday, we didn't water Saturday. Saturday, we watered for part of Saturday. It was a lovely day for some of Saturday. A bit windy, but not too bad. And then it got windy in the afternoon. And trying to water because of the wind carrying it so far away has been a nightmare.
Yeah. John, if I could ask a second part to that question, would you direct sow sweet corn for another week or two? And I'm talking about through the black poly. I just stab it and put it down 2 inches and step in it.
Absolutely.
How late would you go?
Well, look at you see, it's down to economics how late you go. Depending on what variety you're growing, are you trying to get 2-3 cobs per plant?
2 will be fine. Yeah, I don't think I'll get 3, but 2 will be grand. It's more to have a long length of season. You know, it's.
Can you sell a cob with if the cob isn't fully filled out to the end? Can you cut the last inch off and sell it?
Not to supermarkets, but I can to the veg trade job, but not to supermarkets.
You can keep going. You have another fortnight.
Okay.
You have another fortnight, and some people will stop now in another week, less maybe even, because they'll say they can't sell the corn unless all the grains are fully matured out to the end. But the sort of, because I say if you cut an inch of it off, there's still a fine sweet corn, but if your market allows you to sell those ones, then you can certainly go on for another fortnight.
Okay, super. Thanks.
What variety are you growing? Early bird or?
Yeah, early bird and a bit of conqueror as well for the late one, in case we have a cold summer, just to try and carry us on late as we can.
That might be about now. The conqueror is that little bit later maturing. So maybe 10 days time now you want to be finished planting that one or sowing that one.
Okay.
But is the ground already made up, Colm, and the polythene on, and is there great heat in the ground?
Yes, most of it, yeah. Most of it there is, yeah.
That's a big help, and if you have sufficient moisture, I don't know, we should then go for another fortnight, maybe a shade longer.
Okay, yeah, and hope for sunshine.
Well, we're getting a reasonable amount of sunshine. We just need to get heat with it. You know what I mean? So we're just lacking heat. Our temperature for the last number of days has been less than 10 degrees. I think today went to 11 for a period, but it's disappointing for the middle of May. Okay.
No, we're warmer than that, but it is cold at night. Yeah.
And are you getting any frost?
It was 4 degrees this morning. So it was just at the edge of it, you know. We have courgettes outside, but they were double fleeced. And they're okay. I didn't look under it today. I just left them under it. I'll see tomorrow.
And you have those planted outside?
Yeah.
So they're already planted in the ground?
Yeah, they're out for 10 days. I had no space. They had to go out and put they're true poly and 2 sheets of fleece over them. Okay.
I did see some courgette plants today. Now they're due to be planted next Monday. Where the fleece was flapping a little bit.
Yeah.
I noticed some of the leaves quite black.
Okay.
A little concern now that the cells and the tissue would have got cracked and damaged and could allow in the onset of other diseases. But look, we would have to have fleece on. We rarely ever plant before the 15th, 16th of May up in this part of the world, because we know we're going to get frost, and we'd like to get frost after this. But you have to try and harden the plants as best you can. So we're taking the fleece off in the day, putting it on the night, taking it off in the day to try and harden up and keep the plants small.
Okay.
So 4 degrees now is getting cold for courgette.
I know, but I took the chance, and we'll see.
bit of a gamble. Where you are, you're generally speaking, you'll be 2 degrees better off in temperature than we would be, so you should be okay.
Super. All right, John. Thanks a million.
No problem.
Thanks very much, Colin. Okay, John, the next question is in from Breda Mulcahy. This is from last week, but Breda had to go, but she's here this evening. I've just planted lettuce and carrots outside. Any tips for slugs and carrot fly, please? Breda, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi.
I'd say there's loads of people, Breda, interested in that question. There's always a lot of questions on slugs, and certainly this time of the year, there's always a huge amount of questions on carrot root fly. Now, if we start with the slugs first, there's a number of approaches with slugs that we have to adapt, and everybody's going to have to adapt with those. Ireland is a great country for slugs because the climate that we normally have suits slugs. They like it mild and they like it wet. And generally speaking, we get loads of that in Ireland. Now, at the moment, that's the exception, and the level of slugs that I'm seeing is very, very low. In the vegetable business, and particularly your lettuces, there's a few slugs that trouble us. There's one of them that we don't know so well, and he's probably more troublesome. Everybody knows the big slug you see outside your back door if you're late at night. Everybody knows that as the big field slug, and he can do a lot of damage. But the one that does probably more damage is the keeled slug, and the keeled slug is much, much smaller. He's a greyish white in colour, and more often than not, he's not any bigger than the top of your little finger, the nail and the top of your fingers, and he curls up into a sort of a ball. He's not very conspicuous. So they're the slugs that we're mostly dealing with. Good ploughing gets rid of a lot of slugs, because a bit like the weeds that I mentioned earlier on, you bring a good number of them to the surface, and they don't like being up at the surface because it's too dry. And while they're up there, different birds can pick them. Don't know whether you keep any fowl. Do you keep any fowl?
Yeah, I've just got 4 hens.
Right. Fowl are great for eating slugs, be they hens or be they ducks or be they geese or whatever else it is, and have them out wherever you're planting these things well in advance. So you're planting them, of course. They will take a lot of slugs away. The other thing that's hugely important is the debris from the crops that have been there the year before. If there's a lot of debris around, stalks and old bits of leaves and that, they are havens for slugs. They need to be gathered and put into a compost pile and composted, and then put back as nutrients in the ground rather than left on top of the ground. The biggest tip that I can probably give you to limit the quantity of slugs is to till the ground as well as you can. A lot of slugs come up from below, down in the depths of the soil, and they come up, particularly for those of us that's in very heavy clays. The heavy clays, when we get long spells of weather like we're getting at the moment, the ground cracks, big crevices come in the ground. And because it's a crevice, the slug can find his way to the surface much, much quicker. If you till the soil finer, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two, and make it fine, the slug tends not to come up to the surface just as much. So reduce the amount of cracks or crevices is a huge advantage. Your soil type would be what mostly? Would you describe it?
Well, we're here. I'm East Cork, West Waterford, so it's good land. You know, it's good
so
soil. Like,
you consider it a clay loam?
I suppose.
Would a heavy clay. Then it should be relatively easy to till.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it used to be sugar beet, and it used to be tillage.
And then it's sugar beet land is what I call the best land in the country, because you can go in and put sugar beet in around Patrick's weekend. That tells me that it's good tillage soil, and it's not heavy, because if it is, you wouldn't get to drill it late April or possibly early May. Now, after saying all that, that doesn't mean that you've got rid of all the slugs. Slugs there'll still be a certain amount of slugs around. And then, if that's the case, is there anything that you can do for the slugs? Well, you should set traps. That's the first thing. And a trap can be a simple enough thing. Like I mentioned to you a while ago, if you have a lot of big old leaves of Brussels sprouts or cabbages, and sometimes when you pick them up, you'll find the slugs underneath. But I've already told you should remove all of them because they're helping the slug to survive. So what we tend to do is we tend to put out something like a slate in 1 or 2 places and leave them there. And after 7 or 10 days after leaving the slate down on the ground, you pick it up. If you start to look, you'll start to see the population of slugs that you have. And you'll say, yeah, there's enough of them there that's going to cause me a lot of grief, or there's almost none there. So I'm not worried too much about them. So if you see a good few in numbers, then maybe you need to look at putting out some slug pellets. And there are a couple of different organic slug pellets that you can use. And probably the most successful one is a nematode. And it's a nematode, it's a natural product in the soils. The best ones that I see working are ones that actually come from the UK. And you apply those into the soil, and they actually kill the slug. They get into the slug and they kill the slug. And the brand name.
Sorry, how do I spell it? Enema.
N-E-M-A.
N-E-M-A.
S-L-U-G.
Sorry, N-E-M-A-S.
S-L-U-G, Nemaslug.
Oh, right.
Nemaslug. And what you can do with that is Google that, and it'll tell you all about the rates that to use, when to use it, and I find it a very, very good product, and it's a natural product. Now, there's also another slug type of product. It's a different process, and I'll spell this one for you. It's F-E-R-R.
F-E-R-R.
A-M-O-L.
M-O-L.
And it's an iron oxide.
Right.
And the man that mostly supplies that in Ireland is down your part of the country, called Fruit Hill Farm.
Oh, right.
And that works very well.
Okay, thank you.
Now, they're 2 good products, and there are other products, but you have enough of them on that. But you should go the other route that I mentioned earlier on first, of looking about how you can control them naturally yourself. And then, if the season is very wet, you'll still get very big numbers, even if you take all the precautions, and you may have to put out the slug pellets.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks very much.
On to the second part of your question, the carrot root fly. This is a very good question at this moment in time, because we're likely next week to have the first active adults of the carrot root fly starting to fly around. I would think next week if the weather warms up a little bit. And to explain the carrot root fly to you, when I learned about carrot root fly originally, we were told that there was 3 different generations of carrot root fly, and there still is. But back, we'll say 30 or 40 years ago, the first one came and went before the second fella came, and the second fella went before the third fella came. But I have noticed over the last 4 or 5 years that they don't really go away anymore. The seasons have got warmer, and once this fella comes, he pretty well stays with us until late September or early October. And maybe for you people down in the slightly milder areas of the country, could be with you till November. So we have to try and treat them slightly differently now than we used to treat them years ago. But what has revolutionized carrot growing for organic growers is these bio-nets, these very, very fine nets that we put over the crop before they emerge. And it creates a physical barrier where we don't let the adult fly into the carrot, if you understand me.
Yeah.
Now, mostly these carrot root flies, they hibernate over the winter, mostly in our ditches. And they stay there until the early spring, possibly around early April. And at that stage, they hatch out and produce eggs. And they do the eggs out from the ditch a little bit. The interesting thing about the carrot root fly is he's not great at flying, even though he's called the carrot root fly. He's very lazy. and he doesn't like to go much more than about maybe 2 or 3 meters from the ditch. And people would say to me, did you ever notice that the root fly is far worse near the ditch than it is out in the middle of the field? And I've noticed that all my life. That's not to say that occasionally it won't go to the middle of the field, but it isn't that he actually flies there, but a wind carries him there. And again, if you look at the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about this in the previous speakers, we've had a lot of wind. So you couldn't rely on him not being in the middle of the field or 50 meters in from the ditch, because the wind might have carried him there. But he in himself doesn't like going much further than 2 or 3 meters from around the ditch. And if you have a small garden, like 2 or 3 meters by the middle of the garden, you understand me? So you have to understand that. So we try and put in physical barriers to stop the adult fly getting in near the butt of the carrot, because that's where he wants to go to lay the eggs. And then the eggs hatch out and it becomes a little white worm, little maggot. And he's the fella that burrows in to the carrot. And then when he's after burrowing, after a little while, and you pick your carrot when it's half mature, and you see what I would call a type of railway tracking. It's like a railway track down along the carrot, but then that's the root fly having tunneled the carrot. So the advice is, shortly after you've sowed, you need to get this net and put it over whatever area of carrots, parsnips, celery, parsley, root parsley. They're all in the one family, and they're all attacked by this carrot root fly. So if you're doing all those 4 or 5 crops, you should pretty well put them together each year, and then cover them with this barrier or this net. Now, in order to control the root fly, you need to get a net that's known as about 1 millimeter in mesh. Anything much bigger than that, the root fly will get through. So you need to get a fine net. Have you ever seen the net I'm talking about?
I actually have nets that I've recycled, and I'm actually using them.
And you finding them good?
Well, so far anyway, yeah.
The whole secret with them is to make sure when you put them down, that you put them down properly, and that you don't leave any place in the wide earthly world for this fella, because he'll hover around and hover around. And I try to explain to people, he's like you or me. If he is starving, he's going to try to find a way to get the food, and he will find the smallest little bit of a hole in the net, or he'll find some place where you miss putting clay around the outside, or whatever way you have of keeping it in the soil. He will find a way in. So you just have to make sure that he doesn't get in, because if he gets in, all you've done is helped him greatly, because you've now put a lovely roof over his head, and he's going to be twice as active if he gets in under the net. So you have to be careful.
Okay.
Now, some people find that expensive, and they take a shortcut, and what they do is they get the same net, and they just put a meter of it up around the ditch. They get stakes, and they're buried in the ground, and they tie it to the top of the stake about a meter or 1.2 meters high. Because again, as I mentioned to you, he's not a very high flyer either. So if you have that mesh about 1.2 meters high, most times he won't get over it. But again, as you can understand, if you have a whirlwind that would catapult him up over it, then he's going to do damage. We'd have found out in recent times, and the next thing I want to say to you is, there's probably an occasion when you need to take that net off to do some hand weeding.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known this now up till about 4 or 5 years ago. But we now know that he's very lazy, or she's very lazy, this adult, and they sleep till midday. So my advice to you is, if you're going to do anything for weeds, take the net off in the morning and get it back by lunchtime, and do that bit of weeding, because he or she is only active from midday till evening time, and they pack it up in again and go home around 6 or half 6 in the evening. So you have a great window to do the weeding before lunch or after tea in the evening. And then finally, if you're for those people that may not have nets in the baby listening, you can do it by using organic products, particularly some of the very strong garlic sprays. And then there are other products that are not garlic products, but they're natural products derived from other plants, that they keep them, or to keep a lot of them away. One of the products is a product called Tercol, Tercol. Again, that's a product that's supplied by Fruit Hill Farm, and a number of people have been very successful with it. And then there are quite a number of other sources of garlic products that tend to keep the root fly away. But I think if you want to have something that's almost 100% foolproof, then I think the physical barrier of the net is probably the best one.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah, thanks ever so much. Cheers.
Thanks very much for that. John, we just had one in here from Sarah Green. Sarah says, get rid of wild garlic. It seems to be taking over my garden. Sarah, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You can indeed.
Great.
How are you, Sarah?
I'm good, John. How are you?
I'd say you're the envy of an awful lot of people. They would love to have wild garlic.
Yeah, it just seems to be taken over completely. Even my neighbour's lawn has got it now, and it's just taking over.
And was it always in your garden, or did you bring it in?
No, I tell you, I brought something from my father's garden, actually, to be honest, a good few years ago. And I don't know what it was. It was like maybe stone or soil or something, but it's taken off at an awful rate.
Right.
And I've really want to get rid of it.
Trying to get rid of it.
Mm.
Or not now, there's thousands of people would love to have your problem because they love the wild garlic, but it's a difficult one. It's a bit like mint. I don't know whether you've ever had mint and wild garlic are quite similar. You just have to keep at them and create a barrier and dig a trench and stop it coming across or going across to your neighbour. There's no other very simple way of doing it. They're just very, very vigorous growers, and they will multiply at a phenomenal rate. So what we tend to do with them is, what we tend to do with mint in particular, we don't put mint into the ground anymore. We put it into large pots or barrels or something. And then even at that, you need to lift that barrel or pot every so often, or a couple of roots will have come out and got onto the ground. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit of physical work is what you're going to have to do. Is you're just going to have to dig a very deep trench to stop it coming across, maybe 18, 20 inches deep, something we'd say about 40 or 45, 50 centimeters, and that will stop it.
Okay.
There's, I'd say there's lots of people that if would love to get a few of them off you and just warn them.
Now there's the bulbs at the end of it. If I kind of dug and took the bulbs out, I've done that in a few areas, but
you probably didn't go maybe deep enough now. That's why people might have thought I exaggerated when I said 18 inches. But I think you need to go 18 inches or 45 centimeters, because you might have thought you got everything, but there was probably little tiny ones below that, I would have thought.
Yeah. Okay. It's in the lawn, it's in bushes,
I've seen it being curtailed where it was actually on a roadside ditch and got into a person's garden, and they put the lawn and they had soil left over, and they gave the soil to a man, quarter, maybe a half a mile down the road, and he finished up having as much as they had. But they did both curtail it by digging a trench and leaving the trench there for 2 or 3 years, and then it didn't transfer, and then they filled in the ditch, and it doesn't seem to be a problem now. But I think you just have to keep at it with a spade and just say, right, you're not going any further than wherever it is you want to curtail it.
Okay. Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you.
You're aware for you. It's a bit of backbreaking, but that's what
a bit of backbreaking work. Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks, Sarah. John, now the next one is from Sarah Lett, who isn't actually here, but if you want to just see if you can give a bit of advice for what are good methods to get rid of bindweed. I've removed a lot of the bindweed roots from tunnels growing space. Haven't had any bindweed noticed from the outdoor growing area until this year. Any recommendations? Appreciate it. As I say, Sarah isn't here, but she asks that.
So bindweed now, it's funny that you have to bit of bindweed after the conversation just after having, and I had an earlier conversation also about silverweed. Anything, bindweed is very, very difficult to eliminate. I have seen bindweed growing through a 4-inch concrete block, but obviously the concrete block was quite porous, maybe not a great quality one, and maybe the sand that was used in it might have had some particles of clay or something, and the bindweed actually came through it. It was in a glass house. It came from outside and came into the glass house through a concrete block and spread like wildfire. And it loves the conditions in a glass house, particularly if the soil is nice, has the heat, loves the stanchions that hold up the glass and will grow up along it. And again, it's a bit like what I mentioned the previous speaker. You have to try and eliminate the roots. So you have to keep at it to keep grubbing and grubbing and grubbing and until you'll finally eliminate it. Black plastic will do something, provided that no holes come in the black plastic. So I would suggest maybe if you have a bit of an old silage cover, a really strong plastic, and keep it covered, keep the bindweed covered. You'll need to put some weights on it to keep it down. And anytime that you see a hole, because what tends to happen sometimes with black plastic is the various different birds, whether it's blackbirds or crows or pigeons, they will sometimes pick through that and put a hole. And if they let in the smallest bit of light in through the black plastic, the bindweed will find its way up through it and become quite vigorous again. So it's like what I said with the silverweed and with the garlic. You just have to keep at it vigorously all the time till you eliminate it. But if you keep bringing the roots to the surface, you'll get it. But it's continuous work for a while.
Okay.
Maybe the black plastic, if there's a big area within it, maybe the black plastic is the easiest way, but you must eliminate all the light.
Okay, we've just had another one in there from Joe Murray. Joe asks, can you ask John about the best resource for information to start growing soft fruit strawberries, for instance? Joe, are you there? Can you hear us? Hang on, I'll just unmute you. Now, Joe, can you hear us?
Hi, yeah.
How are you, Joe?
Hey, hi guys, how are you? Yeah, look, I'm just dipping my toes into the water here and wanted to see what would you recommend in terms of resources to start, into soft fruit growing.
And are we talking about soft fruit growing organically or conventionally?
Organically.
Organically. Right. Not easy is the first question I'm going to say. A number of people have attempted it. I suppose if I can go back just a little bit, we've got used to getting very, very high quality, perfect fruits now. And most of that is achieved because the growers have gone indoor rather than outdoor. Irish climate is not ideal, generally speaking, for growing strawberries outdoor. This season is probably going to be an exception because it's so warm, or so mild at the moment, not mild, but dry at the moment. Generally speaking, the problem is when there's a lot of fruit fit for picking in late May or June or July, and you get a lot of inclement wet weather, then you get an awful lot of issues with poor fruit, botrytis, poor shelf life, and people get disillusioned. So the people that are left growing strawberries are nearly all conventional growers, and very, very few of them, Joe, are growing outdoor, almost none that I know of. And they've gone, not alone have they gone indoor, because when they went indoor a long number of years ago, they grew indoor in the soil. But they no longer grow indoor in the soil, they grow on tabletops. So which means is they've made some sort of a table and they're growing the strawberries up on tables in compost. It's possibly in a trough or in a bag. And they have complete control over the growing nutrients and also the watering of the fruit. And because this strawberry is now sitting maybe a meter up off the ground, it's also getting a huge amount of natural air, which is preventing the fruit from getting a lot of the diseases. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
Now, organically, you're not allowed to do that. And I know that there has been huge demand from retailers to try and see if the rules could be relaxed and people could grow the strawberries on something similar to the conventional growers. But nobody in Europe that I know of is prepared to allow that. They want the strawberries grown in the ground. Now, can that be done? Yes, it can. Would it need to be indoor? Possibly need to be indoor. And what you'd need to do is create a very large mound of clay, maybe something around half to 3/4 of a metres high, and get that strawberry up a little bit like the tabletop conventional. At least it's not lying on the ground. And try and see if you can get air. Air is everything. Good air movement is everything to producing fruit that won't have so much diseases. Then there are now available good products, organic products that you can apply through irrigation systems to feed these plants. They weren't available years ago, so that's a plus. And there are good varieties of strawberries, and that's also a plus. There is one grower growing organically in a small scale in Wicklow that I do some work with, and he covers his not actually with a full tunnel, but he plants them outside on very large mounds like what I mentioned. He puts them up every 2 years because the strawberry crop is 2 years. And then in order to utilize these mounds for more than 2 years, when the strawberry crop is out and he needs to put in another crop, he grows courgettes up in the same mounds for another year, because it is very expensive putting up these mounds. He has to bring in a contractor to do it. And then the black plastic, again, is an expense. He puts a watering system in underneath the black plastic to make sure that the fruit, that very importantly, gets sufficient amount of water. So where you get a lot of information on it, I'm afraid now I can't really answer that, but the Teagasc have always been very good on strawberry production. So my suggestion would be to talk to somebody in Teagasc that would have knowledge on soft fruit production.
Okay. Well, I'll have to chase up that one. So thanks for that information, John.
Yeah, there are people in Wexford by the name of Englishes. They would be well known as people who would supply strawberry plants, and I'm sure they possibly supply organic plants. But I'd say my advice to you would be, when and if you start, would be to start in a very small way and make sure that you fully understand the labour content that's going in, and are you going to get sufficient amount of money for the fruit that you produce to pay for that labour. That would be my bit of advice.
Okay, well, I appreciate it.
All right.
All right, man. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Thanks very much for that one, Joe. Okay, Joe, we've just got two more that have been sent in previously. The first one was from Therese. I'm not sure if she's here, but we'll go for it anyway. We have a 1/4 acre plot. We ploughed it recently. Soil structure is very blocky and very difficult to till. We've lost farmyard manure. We were thinking of covering with FYM, then covering with plastic till next spring. We're farming organically. Any suggestions? I don't think Therese is there, but
It is.
Under all of our
okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we can hear you. Fire away there, John.
Hello, Therese.
Hello. How are you, everyone?
Yeah. When you say your soil is very blocky, I think I know what you mean. It's extremely heavy.
It is. Can make in pots.
Yeah, make in pots. And you said that you ploughed it recently.
Yes, we ploughed it, and we did ploughed it last week and yesterday.
Okay. Now, this year has been very testing for lots and lots of people who have been ploughing heavy land. And generally speaking, it would not be normal to do what you did, plough it a week ago and start tilling it 6 or 7 or 8 days later. But this year, what we have found is that because it's been so windy and so drying, it can go very, very hard very quickly. And most growers this year have said to me, instead of waiting, John, 5 or 6 days this year, you would need to be in that soil type after 2 or 3 days before it starts to get dried very hard on the surface. So sometimes what happens is, it's like taking a piece of soil and putting it into an oven. It will just bake into a very hard crust, and then it's very, very hard to break down. So I live in a part of the country where we have very heavy clays, and they're best suited to growing grass. But some farmers do plough them a lot, and there's quite a number of potatoes grown in my region, but they, generally speaking, don't get to do much with that land any year until May, which is around now, until that ground warms up, because it's slow ground. Is your ground slow to warm up?
Actually, yeah, it is.
Yeah, because it's of a heavy nature, you see, and it's full of moisture. So you need a long spell. But if you leave it too long, trays, it gets difficult. So there's a balance between it getting too dry and still having enough moisture to break it down relatively easy. But I think what you said to me, you did the right thing. You dissed it. I'm not sure, maybe you might have waited a day or two, maybe too long. Have you found now that you have pieces of clay the size of a cup and they are very hard or not?
Oh no, it is actually very well broke up, very well.
Yeah.
Broke down
Not that
well.
bad.
Okay, so when you say you dissed it, did you just disc it once, or did you disc it a
We
few times?
actually we don't actually know, because we didn't know it was done until it was done.
Once.
We looks like once, I'd say.
Yeah, but then you see, it may very well be, to contradict what I'm after saying, it may very well be that maybe you just got it at the right stage, because it's hugely important to get it at the right stage. Many, many years ago, an elderly farmer said to me, we were looking at land that looked very difficult when it was ploughed. And somebody asked him the question, he said, when and how are you going to till that? And he said, I know how I'm going to till it, but I don't know exactly yet when I'm going to till it. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to stay on the headland. What he meant by that was he was going to keep a very good eye on it all the time, that he was going to get the balance between it being partly dry and partly damp, because in that situation it will take a lot less tilling to break it down.
So, but can I put after this in farm manure? We're planning put farm manure and don't do nothing and like put plastic.
We actually wanted this piece of ground for next year. It's not so much this year growing stuff. This should be next year. So we were thinking of putting a pile of farmyard manure, as much farmyard manure as we can on top of it, and then covering it with plastic or something. Would that be?
I would agree with putting on a sufficient amount of well composted farmyard manure. Now, when you say farmyard manure, I always have to have this discussion with everybody. Everybody has a different description of farmyard manure, but good farmyard manure for me is something that has been well rotted down over a good long period of time, and I can't see too much straw in it. Your farmyard manure have a lot of straw in it?
Straw and rushes, yes.
No, but not
Yeah,
really. They kind of goes to.
Well, it's this year. It's farmyard manure from
year's.
winter 18.
Well, then that should be fine. That should be fine. That should be well composted down. So you had that in a pile, and you have kept it. Did you keep it turned, and did it get it up to a high temperature?
We turned it once. I think, maybe twice.
Maybe it could have been turned once or twice. But once it's well decomposed, well then you will do a tremendous job on difficult soil. The best thing you can do with difficult heavy soil is put on an adequate amount of organic matter. If that's in the form of farmyard manure, or if it's the form of old spent mushroom compost, anything that will help it, because what you are doing is you are putting in a product to break up the stubbornness of the soil. Your soil is a heavy clay, and it needs organic matter to break it up, and that will help you tremendously. Whether you need the black plastic or not is debatable. What is your thinking behind the plastic?
Well, just we thought it helped the farmyard manure compost a bit better, and plus weeds. There was a lot of Dawkins in this before it was ploughed, and the Dawkins were, the roots in some of the Dawkins maybe 2 foot long.
Yeah, well now, I don't know whether you're listening to our earlier conversation, but my advice would be to, before you start putting on the farmyard manure, you've already dissed it, and you tell me you've broken it down into a reasonable condition. I would now like to see you going with some sort of a harrow to see if you can bring those Dawkins to the surface. Because if you're not going planting until next year, I think this is tremendous what you're doing, because you're getting ready to give yourself less trouble, and less trouble is less weeds. So get rid of as much weeds, perennial weeds and annual weeds this season as you can. And if you can keep on bringing all these root surfaces of docks or thistles or scotchgrass or any other perennial weeds, keep bringing them to the surface for a while. And then after a while, put on your organic matter, your farmyard manure. and then maybe go back and disc that back into the soil. I wonder if you need the plastic, because if the weather stays favorable for the summer, can you not control the weeds by just scrubbing?
Yeah,
Right,
okay,
yeah, we
yeah,
can
okay,
do,
good.
yeah.
Easier, maybe, well, not easier, but yeah.
A lot easier and a lot less laboursome, you know what I mean? And you say there's a quarter of an acre, that's a lot of plastic.
We have something ready, but no, I was which one I working already in tunnel and like garden. We have veggies and lots of things. We brought already sandy soil and worked out and everything. It's no problem, but just I thought put more potatoes next year, like for ourselves, and get other piece fix it up.
Yes, and again, that would be a great idea next year I find the potatoes do an incredible job in breaking up the soil even more and putting it into better condition. So, and the potatoes will really like your well composted farm manure. They will benefit hugely from that. And potatoes tend also to eliminate a lot of weeds next year, because if you plant them, and particularly if you plant the tubers when they already have a little sprout on them, a little bud on them, it's always worth waiting until later. Get a bud on the potato, get it to emerge very quickly, and then if you have a reasonable sized drill, you may have to grub it once or twice with a harrow or a hoe or whatever you have, and then because of the great leaf canopy of potatoes, they will suppress an awful lot of weeds after that. So,
8 years ago, we used to for carrots, cabbages, and everything. First time we plowed and everything, actually very well did our veggies very well.
They did very well.
Oh yeah, but then I started get busy and kids, and then this other half we left it. So
I understand. The only
smaller.
Is I always say is when you break land for the first time, that is one of the easier years, because the structure of the soil is that bit better after grass, because particularly if they're good deep rooted grasses, they have gone and done a lot of the work in breaking the difficult soil. Then when you turn that over, it tends to be nicer, it tends to be warmer, it's less compacted. Also, it would normally have less weeds. And then the next year after that is a little bit more difficult, but not too bad. And then after 3 years, then the weeds start to appear, the soil starts to break in structure, particularly if it's a heavy soil. So I always find that the first year people get on very well and they get very enthusiastic, and then they get a little bit disappointed the second year and more disappointed the third year. So your soil types, what you've described to me, you need to keep adding the organic matter, like the farmer manure. Well composted, well rotten farmer manure will be hugely beneficial to your soil. And maybe what is a good idea, if you have a little bit of plastic, maybe you should do some of the quarter of an acre the way I mentioned, with constantly going with this triple, you know what I mean by a springtime harrow or a triple K harrow. It is a tine in the shape of an S. You know the one I am talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Some people call it a pigtail harrow. Any type of harrow with a tooth that will keep bringing the weeds to the surface would be better than a disc, because sometimes with the disc you're only dividing the weed. Now the disc is good for breaking down the soil, but I'm sure whoever did the disking for you, maybe he only went 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe 6 inches, but maybe you need to go a little bit deeper to bring up these ducts, because if you go with a spade, you should always go 6 inches, 15 centimeters minimum. And then if you take all that out from above that, then the rest of that duct tends never to come again.
Yeah, I do for this other piece, which one I now for 8 years working, I do with spade, digging up, yeah. That then I pull them all out.
Yeah. And you have reasonably cleaned it up.
Oh yeah, they then gone.
Well, that's what I am suggesting, trails, and I just think that that's a lot of work if you have to do it with a spade and pulling them up. If somebody can do that with a springtime harrow or a pigtime harrow, some sort of a harrow, it would be great.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Hope that's good for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye now.
Very much.
Bye, thanks.
Raise and Ollie. Okay, everyone, the chat is open now, so if anyone has any supplementary questions for John, type it through there. I just have one more pre-submitted question, John. I thought I'd keep it for last because it's a nice philosophical one. It's in from Ben to Gmail. He says, how do you feel about your connection to the land and the natural world? Ben, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks for your question, Ben.
You had asked me that question maybe 6 months ago, it would have been something different, maybe.
You're welcome.
But I think all of us today that work out in the country and work with the soil and work in the openness, in the present state that we all find ourselves, we just have to consider ourselves to be very lucky people. Now I'm in this business for 40 years or maybe more now, and I suppose I always liked the business that I'm in. I'm involved in growing and advising and growing for all those years. And yes, it has lots of challenges, and yes, there are lots of difficulties. But the little bit of knowledge I have when I went to college, my first tutor said to us on the second day, he said, as long as you all understand here, there was 38 in the class. He said, this business of horticulture, he said, is an incredible business. He said, for those of you that are coming into it, don't expect to become millionaires. He said, the chances of you becoming millionaires in this business is remote. But he said, it's far more rewarding, he said, in lots of other ways. You'll understand nature, you'll understand seasons, and he said, it has so many things to complement it. And I often think, which would I want? It's lovely to have a millionaire and enjoy all the other things, but it's hugely rewarding, the work that I'm involved in. And nowadays I'm mostly involved in advising, but I did grow for a long number of years myself. And I left the growing, I have to admit, and I missed it for a long, long time. But now, because I'm so much involved with growers, I almost treat each grower's crop as my own. And every day for me is a joy. And I just love the work that I do, not just because it's out in the open bin and not just because it's the land. It's as much the people. I find the majority of the people that's in this business are just so different and so giving, not just giving of material things, but of information. And I've gained a good bit of experience over the years, but most of the knowledge I have, I got a good knowledge in school, but it was the sciences. But the rest of the knowledge I got, which is what I call the invaluable knowledge, I learned it from growers. They thought they were learning everything from me, but I learned it from them. So that's the beauty. And I suppose I was fortunate enough in a lot of the work I've done. I've done some work in the UK, in Spain, in France, and I have friends there, and I call them friends, that I've met through growing that I'll never forget. And I go there maybe on a holiday, and they would be insulted if I don't call. They come here, and I would be insulted. So it's just a lovely business to be in, growing crops, understanding seasons. I'm passionate about what I do. I really, really like the crops, the growing, the seasons, and the people. So I wouldn't change it, not for the world.
Thanks for your question, Ben. Thanks very much. Okay, does anyone have any other questions for John? If you do, you can either speak up now or forever hold your peace. Sean, do you have anything further to add?
Yeah, I'm just coming in there. One quick question. Actually, I can ask it, John. John, before we wrap up, because we're in this really strange, dry, hard, coldish period in a time that we wouldn't hope to be, generally, is there anything you would advise people should do in terms of minding plants?
Okay, yeah, I think that's a very good question now. As I said, most of us, maybe the people in the south and the southeast, are not under just as much pressure as the rest of the country, but the rest of the country is under pressure. I'm looking at crops on a daily basis. A lot of direct sown seeds, they're the seeds that you put directly to the soil. They're struggling. The ones that were put in early are possibly okay because they got enough moisture. But the ones that have been put in the last 2 or 2.5 weeks, there's a lot of people scratching their head and they're really wondering, are these things going to emerge or not? And we're now almost, Sean, in the middle of May, and this is a huge period for plantings of a huge amount of brassica plants, cabbages of all descriptions, red cabbage, white cabbage, green cabbage, piney cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli. Half of the Brussels sprouts for the whole season go in between the 12th and the 25th of May. a huge amount of other plants also go in. Somebody mentioned there that they've once sown sweet corn, courgettes. A lot of people will start planting courgettes in the next week. And it's stressful wondering, are these things, after all my work of setting the seed, of setting the plant, are they going to survive? And it's not so long ago, Sean, you and I talked about this several times in 2018. And yes, it wasn't as dry as this early. It was only about now it started to get dry. But by the end of June, we were in very, very serious issues with trying to put plants into the ground, because you still have to plant an awful lot of brassicas every week to give successional supply. And we really stay planting every year till the 25th of July. So you can only hold back for so long, and then you start to miss your successional plantings for your successional harvestings. So what do? Well, my advice is, whatever soil you're on, you need to get the soil tilled finely. You cannot have rough soils, and by rough I mean lumpy soils, because if you understand what lumpy soils are, they're clods of clay, maybe like I described a few minutes ago, quite dry, and they're big particles, like maybe little stones, and between each of those are big air pockets. And if there's a lot of air in there, then there's a lot of wind and sun heat going to get in there and dry the plant out more. So you've got to till that soil down finer and finer and finer, the drier it gets. Now, people say that's more I till it, the more it's going to dry out. Well, my advice on that one is, whatever equipment you're using for tilling it, you need to get it done quickly, and try and do it over a short period of time, but quickly, so that you're not turning the soil every half hour and exposing it more and more. So travel slowly with the tractor and try and get it into a fine tilt as best you can, as I keep on saying, like flour. And then when you have it in flour, you're either going to plant into the flat, or you're going to plant into a raised bed or a ridge. And my advice was, and I've taken a few plants with me, until I see if I can show them to you here. Yeah, I've taken a few plants here with me, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. These are mostly what we can plant. There's a young white cabbage plant. You can see that it's in a module. It has a nice few white roots in it, but you need to plant that into firm soil and plant it deeper than normal. Normally we just put that much of it underneath the soil. I'd be suggesting that when the weather is very dry, you need to go up almost to the growing point and leave just the growing point out. Maybe you're a little bit afraid that you've buried it too far, but once you leave the growing point above the soil surface, it will be fine. When you then have it planted, Sean, you need to firm that plant in tightly. And if you're doing it by hand, most people would just stand on top of the plant, on the side of the plant, and press it in. So press it an extra little bit. If you're doing it with mechanical planters, as a number of the growers are doing, then you need to set more pressure on the two press wheels that are going at an angle to the plant and firm it in very tightly. And going back to 2018, I had growers saying, John, what am I going to do? I've missed 3 weeks of planting. It's been too dry, it's too dry, it's too dry. I said, lads, you have to go and do exactly what I'm after describing. Till the soil fine. By tilling it fine, what happens after a period of time, if time would allow you, moisture will come from below up if it's fine. We call it capillary action. I always say it's like a sheet of blotting paper. If you wet one corner of the blotting paper, then after a period of time, you'll see that the dampness has moved up the blotting paper a long way up. Well, fine soil will do that by capillary action. So it'll drag moisture up from the bottom and get to where maybe you've planted these roots. Finally, if I could say, Sean, these little roots, and most of us are now planted in modules, make sure that they're extremely well soaked before you put them into the ground. Most growers sometimes will bring these plants to the ground, or to the field, they'll leave them in the headland, they'll start going up the row and coming down the row. Maybe it took a half an hour to do that. While that's happening, these ones that you left in the headland, they're drying out. You should have a bath of water or a barrel of water or something that you can douse it into just before you go planting it, and make sure that this little module, and it has a great capacity to hold moisture. And I noticed that any plant that's planted in a module like that, it will stay alive even in dead heat without getting any rain for 2.5 or 3 weeks. And at that stage, maybe it will have rained from the top, or maybe the capillary action of the moisture has come up to meet it from the bottom. But in 2018, anyone that followed that practice, we had a 98% plant strike. And the only places where the plants didn't survive was those people with mechanical planters. The first 2 plants at the headland, where it took a little while for the coulter of the planter to bury itself into the ground, probably didn't survive. And very, very stony places or very cloddy parts of the fields, the plants didn't survive. So to recap, till the soil very fine. That's the first thing. Secondly, plant a very wet plant, as much water as that module can hold. Get that. Thirdly, plant it deep. Fourthly, press the soil in tightly. If it was seed, you'd roll it. Roll the seed after sowing. The issue with rolling on very heavy clays is that if you're unlucky enough, or lucky enough, to get very heavy rain after sowing and you've tilled it very fine, then you press the soil with the rain. And if the weather became very dry afterwards, you create a crust. And maybe the seed would struggle to come up through the crust. But there's other ways of coming around that later on if that happened. At the moment, the forecast is just suggested for us that we're not going to see any rain for the next 7 to 10 days. So if I were sowing seed now, I would be inclined to press the soil very tightly. And that would also help to bring up the moisture from below by helping the capillary action. Irrigation then, Sean, I mentioned earlier on, a number of people already out irrigating. The issue is, for some parts of the country, is this evening now as I'm talking to you, we have it lovely and calm, so it'll be ideal for irrigating. For small growers, the best way to irrigate is to irrigate by drip irrigation, which is a lay-flat plastic pipe. It's a lay-flat. Once you put pressure on it, it opens up like a hydrodair pipe. And they have little holes along them. Some of them have a continuous line of holes. More of them have a hole to match the plant distance you might be putting in. Sometimes people put lettuce in it, 12 inches or 30 centimeters apart. So there'll be a little hole on the lay-flat beside the head lettuce. And it just goes drip, drip, drip. But if it's dripping for 24 hours, it'll wet all the ground around where the module is. So drip irrigation is far more efficient than overhead irrigation, because most overhead irrigation goes off into the atmosphere, or as I said, into the neighbour's field, whereas drip irrigation, it's laboursome to put down, but once it's down, it's very easy to manage.
Thanks, John. I just have one last question in here, which should bring us up nicely to 8:30. From Chris Kingan. Silverweed is becoming a big problem for me. I'm an organic farmer. It grows very thickly on about 10 acres. Will I have to reseed the grass, or is there an organic way to minimize it? Chris, are you there?
I'm unmuted now, yeah?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello. How are you, Chris? How are you? Yeah, we spoke about silverweed. How would you describe your soil, Chris? Is it heavy or light? I presume it's heavy and damp.
It's the soil the silverweed grows on is it's a black peaty soil with little bits of limestone in it, you know.
Okay. And
I've never had problems with this silverweed in 30 years, and in the last 2 or 3 years, bigger areas have taken over the land. It's spread surprisingly quickly.
It's a scourge. I've noticed it myself. We've discussed it earlier on, and I really think, Chris, if it's in the volumes that you're talking about, by far the best way is to forfeit whatever's there for now and reseed, because
it takes over, like from about a month's time till about end of August. It completely takes over the pasture.
Yeah, and I have noticed only last week where I had a plantation of rhubarb with a grower. It's about maybe 5 years planted now, and I never noticed any silverweed there the first year, the second year. But a neighbouring farmer, cleaned out a ditch, and he cleaned the ditch out both sides, and I think it came up from there. And this thing has travelled. The field is about 260 metres in length, and it's gone more than halfway up the field. So, and this is a conventional grower, and he has tried every which way with conventional chemicals to get rid of it, and he's not getting rid of it. And my advice to you is to get that thing ploughed, get at it, like I mentioned to the previous grower, and try and keep grubbing and bringing it to the surface, over the summer, and go back and reseed in the autumn. I think that's my only advice, because, as I said, it even conventionally, it's massively difficult.
Yeah, right. It looks like a problem because when even if you plough it up, you're going to be cutting it into bits, and it looks like it'll spread from that.
Yeah, what I want to do is, that's why I just said earlier on, you have to be careful not to disc it, because when you disc it, you just keep dividing it and multiplying it and dividing and multiplying it. I'd like to plough that and plough it well, and then start going with some sort of a toothed springtime pigtail, call it whatever you like, harrow. Go shallow first and just bring some of the shallow roots, we'll say, for 2 or 3 inches to the surface. Get the wind and the sun to dry them out. 4 or 5 days later, if the weather keeps good for you, do the same, but go an inch or 2 more. And if you keep at it, you will eliminate it. Yeah, but you need a dry summer to do it. If you get a wet summer, you're at nothing, because all you're doing is transplanting it. But the weather we had for the last 5 or 6 weeks would have been tremendous for getting rid of anything with a rhizome, be that a silverweed or a scotch grass, or even that bindweed that somebody mentioned earlier on. Anything that will dry the roots. It's the only option you have organically. There is no other option.
Yeah, okay. At least I'm clear on what to do. It's something I'd have to prepare for, so it won't be this year. So then we're at the mercy of the weather then, but I can get prepared for it.
Maybe, as I mentioned, Chris, maybe you don't need to do it all in one big bite. Maybe make 4 quarters and say, right, I'm going to do a quarter of it each year, and 1 year you might be very successful and 1 year less successful, but it's very much weather dependent.
Yeah. That's good advice, splitting it up a bit anyway. Make it easier.
I think that's what I would do if it were mine.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's great.
All right. No bother.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone else for joining us tonight. There's no other questions. Thanks very much, John. Keep your eye, everyone, on your inbox, because when we announce the next talks with John, we'll be sending it straight to you. You don't need to re-register or anything, so the link will go automatically to you. And thanks again, John, for this evening.
All right, thanks to everybody. Thanks for joining us, and hope everybody gets a bit of information from it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Cheerio.
Bye.